The system has failed. How the American dream is broken with Jessie May. This week on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. Hey everyone, welcome to the Extreme Personal Finance Show. I'm actually really looking forward to this episode. It's been a long time. Today my guest is part librarian, part musician, part wordsmith, but 100% badass. But Jessie May has been on her own financial freedom quest, but she also likes helping regular folks like me shred debt and master money without selling their soul to the corporate machine. She's an author of the book Money Hacks for Metalheads and Old Millennials, and she likes bringing practical, no-nonsense money advice to the rest of us who'd rather be at concerts than balancing spreadsheets. Jessie's here to show us how to take control of our finances and just live better. Jessie, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing well. So our paths crossed a number of years ago because you online Metalhead money.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm heavy metal money. And so
Yes,
our paths had to cross, right?
they had to. It was fate.
That's right. That's right. So, and I can't remember, did we meet in person at a FinCon even? No,
I think we met online, like in a Plutus thing.
it was, yes, you're right.
Yeah,
That's what it was. Yep. Yeah. So one of these days we got to be in the same room at the same time,
I know.
right? It's like
That
last
would be
year at
awesome.
FinCon. Yeah, last year at FinCon, I ran into punk rock money. So it's like we all got to get together and just hang out, right?
Yeah,
That's aw
definitely.
that's awesome. Well, I'm glad you took take some time to join me. I'm excited to kind of talk through a little bit of how you got into writing a book for Metalheads and Old Millennials, a personal finance book, but then also you're a librarian. I thought, didn't at one point, weren't you a teacher?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
I thought so. I thought so.
yep.
So let's start at the beginning. Let's go back. So what came first for you? Was it the journey as a librarian, how that intersected with the passion for music, or did one influence the other? Like, take me back.
Oh, okay. Well, we're gonna go way back then.
Yeah.
We're gonna go way back. Um, so I've been playing music since I was a kid, and went to a high school for the arts, like a public magnet high school,
Oh, wow.
and
Cool.
studied music there, and was very fortunate to have a great teacher and great other kids in the band. And I ended up going to college as a music major. But then very shortly into that, I was like, you know what? Like, I don't like jazz enough to practice enough to get good enough at it to make a living. So I better think of something else that I like. So I ended up changing my major to English, and I called my dad, who was a school social worker at the time, and I said, "Oh, I might want to do this thing called Teach for America that I heard about, which is where they stick you in a classroom and hope something good happens." I guess I really don't know too much about it, but he was like, "Well, if you want to do that, why don't you just become a teacher?" And I was like, "Oh, I never thought of that, Pop. Oh, man." So then I became an English education major, and started off my career as an eighth grade English teacher. And then, still playing music the whole way. Like, I minored in music in college and
Hmm.
played in bands since I was 20, which is more than 2 decades ago at this point.
So what's harder, a gigging musician or teaching English to eighth graders?
Oh my gosh. Well, at least if you're teaching English to eighth graders, you have health insurance in Connecticut.
There you
Um,
go.
and you have your summers and your weekends off. So if you want to also be a gigging musician, you can do that.
Sure.
Actually, a lot of like the real musicians I know are teachers in some capacity. Either like they teach at public school and gig on the weekends,
Sure.
or they teach music lessons. So they definitely, put together multiple sources of income and, that kind of thing. But yeah, so then I was an eighth grade English teacher, and, luckily it was the days before kids all had cell phones. But, I was like, yeah, this is okay. But then every time we'd go to the library, I'd be like, well, this is fun. How do I get that guy's job? So
Sure.
I went back to college and got a master's in library science and a certification to be a school librarian. And so now I'm an elementary school librarian. I teach K to 5. So I still teach classes all day, but it's just, it's a little different from being a classroom teacher versus being a specials teacher. There's pros and cons to both. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so I've been a school librarian now for, I think like 12 years.
Wow.
So
That's
yeah,
cool. That's cool.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love it. I think it's kept me in education for sure.
Do
Yeah.
you, so where did it start for you that you got interested in the personal finance aspect of it, or what inspired you to write Money Hacks for Metalheads and Old Millennials?
Oh, well, I was getting divorced actually.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. And like I had always been pretty good with money, like in terms of not going over my budget and always like putting a little emergency fund aside, but I really wasn't too sophisticated about it. And in the process of, filling out all this paperwork and being like, gee, maybe we could have done something more productive with this, I realized that I had quote unquote invested my IRA in cash
Mm,
for like a
yes.
decade.
You know what? You're not alone.
Yeah, no, I'm not. But
Yep.
I figured that out. And then I figured out, okay, I have to like pick an investment. And so I did that. And then I kept sending money, but I didn't have automatic investments set up. So it just sat in my core account. So that was like another year or two before I figured that out.
Hmm.
Um, and then I was like, you know what? Like, I think I'm a pretty smart person. Maybe I'm biased, but I don't think I'm like a dodo.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know any of this stuff. So I started reading books about it, checking them out from the library. And I started to think like maybe my peer group would also like to know this information because it's not like you go out to a show and like, all right, bros, like who's investing what in their Roth IRAs?
That's right.
So it's just not something that people talk about. So I started writing columns about money on a blog I edited called Alternative Control, and that was it was mostly a music blog, but it had like some other columns where we just basically wrote whatever we felt like. People, they seem to get into those columns and enjoy them. And then the pandemic happened, and I didn't have kids yet, and we were home from school. And I was like, I have a lot of time on my hands. Like, why don't I turn these columns into a book? So, like you were saying, like you have
Hmm.
the blog posts. Like I probably had like 5 or 6 pretty lengthy blog posts and turned them into chapters and wrote a couple other chapters and intro and conclusion. And like I had read like a lot of personal finance books before writing this one. And so each chapter has like a suggested reading at the end,
Hmm.
like if there's a topic that you want to go deeper on, like one of the chapters is passive income. Like there's no way I could write a really meaty thing about real estate investing because I don't do it. But
Hmm.
if you're interested in it, like here's some books that would get you started on the topic. So that's how the book came about.
That's awesome. That's awesome. What do you think in either writing the book or just in your experiences, what are some of the most like metal money lessons you've learned like the hard way? Well,
Oh
you
man.
mentioned having money invested in cash.
Yeah. Yeah. That was felt made me feel like a dodo. I was like,
That's all right.
whoops.
That's all right.
Yeah.
Um,
So yeah, that was tough. Also the book brings in like the underground music angle
mhm.
as, an expensive hobby that I'm still involved in.
That's right.
I've been involved in for many years. There's a lot of different schools of thought on how to promote yourself as an underground musician, and I'm more of the DIY school of thought. And yourself and your band members like using what skills they have to keep costs down and certainly paying professionals when you need to, but maybe if there's a skill that you can barter with them, that could work in both of your favors. For instance, I bartered writing services with a PR company for years.
Really?
And yeah, yeah. And I think that worked out well for both of us.
That's
Um,
awesome. Tell me a little bit more about that. So what
yeah,
was the,
yeah. I was in a band called Owlmaker, a stoner metal band that's really awesome and gets about 10 listeners a month on Spotify. So if you like stoner metal, go look it up. But that was the first band where we are like, let's try to take this to the next level. So, we hired a PR company and I was like the main contact person. And as I was communicating with the owner of the company a lot, uh, I mentioned that I wrote band bios and stuff like that. And he was like, well, hey, like, do you want to write some band bios for my bands? Do you want to write some press releases? And I was like, yeah, I do. So when I needed PR, we would barter. When I didn't need PR, we would do old fashioned just paying me. And sometimes when like I needed PR, but I didn't have time to do writing, I would just pay him,
Right.
we just had a very friendly, back and forth relationship with that. So that worked out really well. I'm fortunate that my amazing husband, who's also been my drummer in some but not all of the bands, is a great artist. So any band that he's been in along the way, he's been able to do artwork and CD layouts and things like that. Some bands are really good at recording and mixing and engineering themselves. We've just pretty much done like demos ourselves, but hired out professionals for recording. So it really depends on what your skill set is. And some things you can do yourself, some things you can trade for, some things you pay for.
I think people don't realize that bartering does work if you are creative enough. Like I have a friend that
Mhm.
he had to move out of state. Okay, so
Mhm.
he got another job and was moving out of state, and he was selling his house. But before he sold his house, he had to do this big remodeling project to sell it. He had to replace a bunch of windows and stuff, and he had an old like 1994 like Range Rover or something in his garage,
Mhm.
right? And he was going to sell this car. And this was like a $60,000 car that he was going to
Mhm.
sell. It's a used Range Rover. He bartered with the contractor.
Oh, wow.
So he actually, for the car, was able to do this major renovation project so they could sell their house. And like that was
Wow.
when he was like, dude, bartering does work, man. If you just ask the question, like,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you never know, if you have the right thing or the right skill and
yeah, it's
somebody
awesome.
else can use it, you never know.
So as a librarian, like you are surrounded by knowledge like all the time. And I want to know, like, what do you think like the public or like, typically the average person, they just don't get about personal finance or they misunderstand about money. What do you think that like what they just don't seem to get it? What do you think that is?
Well, I think something that was definitely intimidating for me, and I think maybe for a lot of other people, is investing.
Hmm.
I think most people stop at like I'll contribute to my 401k and I'll check off the box and I'll just, that's it. Like I contribute to it, I checked off a box and I'm done until I have to take money out of it. But there's more things that you can do beyond that. And even within your own workplace retirement account, you can look at what you're invested in and what the fees are, and is this the best thing for you? And one reason that I keep my Roth IRA hanging around, even though I invest in my 403b, is because I can pick anything I want to put in it. I like
Hmm.
right now, I mostly put like a target date index fund in it that's from Fidelity and VTI
Yeah.
and a Fidelity S&P 500 fund. Um, and the fees of all of those are very low. The choices that I have to invest in my 403b, the fees are not so low,
That's right.
but I want to have that tax advantage in the beginning.
Hmm.
I want to have a little bit off my taxes. And I like the guy that we work with. And I feel like since my district doesn't offer investment with Fidelity, and like I basically have to go through a person, that it's worthwhile for me to do that rather than try to navigate some of those finance companies on my own.
Hmm.
Like I'll give a more specific example. My 403b is through a company called Security Benefit, and they have a program for teachers called Invest Myself, and you can basically supposedly invest yourself and not have like a middleman kind of person. So I was like, let me look into that. So I told my guy about it, and I was like, do you think this would be better than me getting the Vanguard 2050 target date thing through you and paying extra? And he's like, well, you wouldn't have me, but let me look into it. So he tried to call him and got the runaround and finally got the phone number and tried to call them and was just on hold. So he said, well, I wasn't able to get any information about, but here's the phone number, if you want to look into it.
Hmm.
So I tried the same thing and I called them and I called them and I was on hold
Ugh,
and, like, and if I can't even get a hold of these people to find out what it is,
what
like,
a
do I want to give
nightmare.
them money?
Right.
And then when I need the money, like so I was like, forget about this. Another thing was I had to buy back some time for maternity leave for my retirement. And he was able to navigate that and make sure that the money got from the investment account to the teacher's retirement board in the right amount of time and the right stupid forms were filled out. And so, he did all that and I didn't have to worry about it, but it was it was a process.
Hmm.
I'll take my Roth IRA on one side and then have my 403b on the other and have a little bit of both worlds. But yeah, so back to the original question, I think people feel uncomfortable picking their own investments because it sounds scary and there's a lot of terminology.
Yep.
But I think if you read a book like The Simple Path to Wealth or something like that, it explains what the average person needs to know. And like, I'm not an expert on any of it. I still have to look up some of the terminology myself. I know, I have a long time horizon. I can pick a low cost index fund. It's not going to cost me a lot of money. And in 20 years, it'll be worth more than paid for it. And
That's right.
like, do I really need to know that much more? Not really. Like it doesn't have to be super complicated. So I
Right.
think that's something that more people would benefit from.
Yeah, for sure. I think, because even, when I started out, just even as I got into my 30s, I was still, well, investing is only for those super smart people that had a
Mhm.
lot of money. You know what I mean? Like it was very, very scary, right? You didn't know what to do. You
Yeah.
didn't want to mess up for whatever reason. I thought I would
Yeah.
like I thought I would make a mistake,
Hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, I want to talk a little bit about, as I mentioned before, is the American dream broken? Because
Oh.
I've been talking with a lot of, I've had other guests on the show. We've been talking a lot
Mhm.
about, the middle class trap. We've been talking about is being able to afford, a house and that American dream. You talked about kind of how the system is broken and it makes it hard for people to reach that American dream.
Mhm.
What do you think some of the biggest barriers are?
Well, I mean, I'd start off with the American dream is an ideal that I don't think has really been realized for most groups of people in our country. Like perhaps it was realized for white men from like the 50s to the 80s, but for women, for minorities, for young people now, I don't think that, I think it's more of an ideal than a reality for people, unfortunately. And if you look at like the GI Bill after World War II that was supposed to make it easier for veterans to buy houses, 95% of those VA loans went to white people. But there's plenty of black veterans from World War II. So, what about them? They didn't get the chance to build that generational wealth for their families. And redlining was legal until the 70s. Women could be denied credit and mortgages and stuff until like the 80s, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I can't believe where like some banks, the husband would have to go in to get certain accounts or to get credit cards. That just boggles my mind.
Yeah, it's amazing, like in a bad way.
Yeah.
But so you have all that history. Perhaps like some people were able to achieve the American dream of being able to purchase a home and being able to have their children have a better lifestyle than they did. And then we fast forward to the 2020s and inflation is crazy. Housing prices are crazy. Childcare costs are crazy. Healthcare costs are crazy. It's just a lot. Like life is expensive. And I happened to buy my house in 2018. And because that's just when I happened to need to buy a house. One of my younger brothers is renting a one bedroom apartment right now that, is in a similar town. Like, it's not in like a fancy place. It's just like a regular town in Connecticut, similar to where I live. And his one bedroom apartment costs as much to rent as my three-bedroom house.
Hmm.
And that's just because of like a difference in timing. But he's trying to buy a condo now and he wanted to bid like 300 grand and he got bid like right away. A mediocre condo.
Right, right.
So, you know, I didn't, I wasn't like a special person buying a house in 2018. I didn't have a crystal ball. That's just when I happened to need it. If I happened to need a house in 2025, I don't think I'd be purchasing one. So yeah, I think really rising costs of housing, childcare, education, healthcare make it difficult to achieve the American dream unless you have like a pretty high income. And I don't mean like being like a millionaire, but
Mhm.
making, a household income of like 100 grand or more. In some ways, I feel like the new middle class.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't mean that in like a bad way, but just shit's expensive, man. Like,
Depending where you are, I absolutely believe that. I know that in one of the it might have been Choose FI. I can't remember what group it was. Someone asked the question about did they think $100,000 was considered high income, and that was the consensus was it all depends on where you live. If you live on the edges, no, it's not. But if you live in Iowa, yeah, sure. you know,
yeah. And I mean, I think if you're a single person and you make 100 grand a year, like you're great. You're doing fine. But if you're a family of four and you're the
oh,
sole earner, you're you're stretched.
yeah, I know that we were talking about this at one of our meetups too, that the cost of childcare, there's a lot of families now where the childcare expense is more than their mortgage.
We are about to join that camp,
Oh, wow.
unfortunately. When we booked this date, I was like, oh, by June 9th, like I'm gonna be all chill because this is the last week of school. But then last week we found out that our daycare provider, who we really love and who is amazing and who also happens to be very affordable, is retiring next month.
Ah,
Yeah. And I'm really like personally sad about it because we love this lady and she's been our childcare provider since my kids first went to daycare.
sure,
But she has things she has to take care of and that's that's what she needs to do, which is perfectly fine. But now we need to find new daycare. It's going to be a process. And I'm optimistic. We've made some calls. We found a couple places that have spots. So like finding a place with spots is the number one challenge.
sure,
Um, I'm optimistic that we will do that. If we don't find a place with spots, no, that's like a whole nother thing. But
sure, sure.
um, but yeah, I mean, I think that whatever new place we find, it probably will be more than our mortgage.
What else do you think keeps those people stuck? A lot of those things, it's hard because the families or those people, they can't directly control some of that stuff, right? They
Yeah.
can't control how expensive childcare is. They can't control the price of groceries, right? But I'm just trying to think, like, what are some other things that they can do to help break the cycle, and what can they do to achieve what their version of the American dream is? I guess maybe we need to define that, right? The American dream is like the house, the family, the 9 to 5, the pension. Like, I don't know. Like,
I mean, for me, I would say, yeah. I'd say, yeah, home ownership, a secure retirement, healthcare that you can afford, and also like being able to do something fun once in a while, being able to order a pizza,
yeah, right.
nothing crazy, but just, being able to modestly enjoy life. What can people do? Like part of my dilemma as like a self-styled personal finance guru,
Yeah.
and I wrote a book about this. Like I feel like the book I wrote in 2020, a lot of it doesn't even apply with all the crazy inflation that has happened since then. You
Wow.
know, like I feel like maybe not that it doesn't apply, but like it's harder to apply
Hmm.
with rising costs. But I think something that's worked for me is tracking expenses. It helps, like if you do it at least twice a year, to go over your budget,
Hmm.
to make sure that it's accurate, and so the expenses that you're tracking are accurate. And then when something unexpected happens, then you can just go to your information and you don't have to figure everything out from scratch. You have it all there in front of you and you can say, okay, so if we have to pay more for daycare, what can we get rid of here or what can we adjust there?
Right.
Um, so definitely tracking expenses, I would say, would help
What
people.
tools do you and your husband use to track your expenses?
We just use Google Sheets,
Okay.
honestly. We put all the bills in Google Sheets. We do kind of a reverse budget. Like most of our bills get, we have it paid automatically. So on the Google Sheet, it just subtracts. Like, here's our net income, after all the health insurance and taxes and whatever, here's what our paycheck is.
Hmm.
Here's all the bills that we pay out of that paycheck. And then whatever is left over is what we have to spend on ordering pizza or, things like that. And that, it works for us. It's not super complicated, but, it does the job so far. So tracking expenses, I'd say food costs are one of the big expenses that I think you have more control over than
Hmm.
like your mortgage, for
Sure.
instance. Shopping around at different places, going to two different grocery stores is a pain in the neck, but if I do that consistently throughout the month, it'll save us 200 or $300, which
Wow,
I know because I keep track.
that's
Yeah.
huge. Wait,
It's huge.
do you have Aldi where you are? Is that where you are?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. We start at Aldi and get what we can there. And then whatever they don't have, I just get at Big Y. But if I only go to Big Y or one of those other places, like it's a lot. So I'd say tracking expenses, being a little more hands-on in your grocery shopping, and then like really saving money when you can and having an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months, might seem like a lot of cash to sit on. But again, like when something comes up, then you're ready for it. So,
Especially if you're a homeowner.
yeah, yeah, for sure. And like I've even said to myself, like, this is crazy. Like, why do we have this sitting there? Or, why don't we go on vacation or, do
Mhm.
something like exciting? Like, you see on Instagram, everybody's in the Bahamas and I'm not in the Bahamas. Why not? But if I can't find daycare for two kids and one of us has to quit our job and the other one has to try to cover the household expenses, we can use that emergency fund to kind of get us through.
Sure.
Or even if, our expenses increase, we can use that, little by little.
Yeah. Have you
And
done the analysis at what point, if you can't find daycare, one of you, would you guys stay home with the kids then?
I mean, someone would have to. Yeah.
Yeah. Figure
I
out
mean,
like
but
what that threshold is. Like, okay.
I mean, we know we would be short about at least $1,000 a month.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's
but
so
I'm
crazy.
optimistic that we'll find daycare.
Good, good.
I like I'm not super worried about that,
Hmm, hmm.
luckily. But if it came to pass, we would at least have like a buffer, and we would be able to manage it rather than it being like a complete disaster. So,
Right. Do you feel as though, so these are, again, I love, these are like tactical ways that you could like start taking control. What if we were to rewrite, like, what, in your opinion, would be the new American dream? Like, if you were going to like create something new, right?
mhm.
What do you think it would still be kind of that same, like, or would it be something different? I'm curious.
I mean, I feel like it would be the same, but I think the solutions are more systemic solutions than ones that individuals can necessarily make happen. I think somehow making healthcare less costly would be a systemic solution that would help everybody because everybody needs healthcare. It doesn't matter
Oh,
how much money
totally.
you have, you
Yeah.
know? But like, and people say, oh, well, your taxes are going to go up. Like, I pay $800 a month between health insurance premiums and paying our HSA so that we can meet our deductible every year.
Hmm.
So if my taxes went up, but I didn't have to pay $800 a month for healthcare, I'd probably come out even.
Right, right.
So I don't know exactly what the solution is, an
Sure.
elementary school librarian, but I know that some of the solutions are above our heads, you know.
Right on. No,
Well,
that's awesome. So your book, Money Hacks for Metalheads and Old Millennials, you have the second volume out now.
yeah.
What updates or what major changes in the second volume?
Well, I added a chapter about finances of parenthood.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, talks about childcare costs. Talks about different ways to save for your kids, like the difference between like a 529 and a UTMA account, different options and pros and cons of those. Also did an interview with Amy Tung Berry Smith from Year of the Cobra.
Hmm.
And I think she's in Amin Ra now too. Um, but she's an awesome musician and her husband had a duo, Year of the Cobra. And they have two kids. And,
Hmm.
you know, like they're a pretty serious band that toured around the country and went to Europe and this and that. So like how did you manage your life as a musician with
Right.
your family life? How did you balance it? So that was a cool interview. So that was the biggest change. But then I went back and added things to the investing section because I learned more about investing.
Hmm.
It's not like a super deep dive, but it's a little bit deeper than the first volume goes. And then just changed some of the language, made it more gender neutral, updated the numbers for 2023 because the numbers for what you can contribute to an IRA, things like that change every so
Sure.
often.
Sure.
So yeah, that's what's different.
Awesome. And we're going to have links in the show notes. So if people want to check out your book, if there was like a message that we want to leave people with that feel like, again, the system is rigged against them, you know, they're just trying to survive. I guess what kind of words of encouragement would you leave for them?
Well, I mean, this is coming from a place of privilege. So, take it with a grain of salt, but the system is rigged,
Hmm.
but you can always do something.
Yeah.
There's always something you can do. The system does not have to beat you. You might not beat the system, but you can still make it. And just to do what you can do, even if it seems like a small thing at the time, and not to give up. There's a Google fractional shares.
Yeah,
You can do it.
for
You can
sure.
do
I
it.
mean, we were just doing that again with my daughter. My daughter's 23, so she doesn't have a lot to invest
Hmm.
with, but she's got some. So
Hmm.
if she can start investing in some iShares or something, right? So yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. What's next for you? You're gonna keep on going, and is there going to be a volume three? What about music?
Oh man.
You got some new music. Tell people about your new music that's out right now.
Ooh, yeah. Well, my most active band at the moment is called Turkey Vulture, and we put some new music out in February. You can find it all on Spotify. But I also put out a couple solo songs in just last month, end of May. You can find them. It's Jessie May on Bandcamp and Jessie May on Spotify. It is a single called This Dream, and the A side is kind of a reimagined version of Woody Guthrie's This Land Is Your Land, but it's This Dream Is My Dream. And I actually wrote the lyrics to that in 2020, back,
Really?
sitting around the house in the pandemic. Yeah. And now it's
Mm.
like everything is like lit on fire.
Right, right,
Like, I just never got around to recording it at that time, but there we go. But if you listen to the song, you'll understand what I'm saying.
right
Um,
on. Yep.
but yeah, so that's the A side. And then the B side is a cover of Bruce Springsteen's Atlantic City. That's a little more up tempo with a little punk flavor. And I just really love that song. And I feel like that song is about the American dream or like the pursuit of it and not being able to get it or trying to go about it in a way that's not working.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I mean I like it. It's the first solo thing I've ever released. I played everything except the snare drum. My engineer played the snare drum. I played guitar, bass, accordion, sang, and I like it. It's stripped down, kind of folk punk vibe, but it's me. It's 100% me,
I
for
love
better
it.
or worse. So
I love it. And we'll have links in the show notes too. Again, if you're driving
awesome.
right now, don't worry. We'll have links in the show notes. That's awesome. I want to thank you so much for joining me today. It's super fun to chat, and you're always welcome back on the show. I want to thank everyone else for listening. I really do appreciate it. Please subscribe, follow us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and we'll see you next time on the Extreme Personal Finance Show. And here is a little bit of Jessie May.